What's going on, everybody? Tim Styro here with Styro Fitness and Nutrition, and this is video one of a nutrition video series that I'm putting together to help people better understand what they should be focusing on when it comes to trying to improve your nutrition for health, for performance, and for the goals that you may have. So we're going to start today with this first video with going over whole foods, why they're important, why they matter, and ultimately what you can start doing to incorporate them into your day-to-day routine. Other videos that are going to be covered will revolve around macronutrients, vitamins, minerals, how to select the appropriate amount of food specifically for your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, as well as how to put all this together into a way to incorporate healthy nutritional strategies for the long term and so that it fits pretty effortlessly into your life. The biggest thing we're going to cover today is what whole foods actually are. What's the difference between these whole foods, these minimally processed foods, these ultra processed foods? Where do different foods fit on this scale and on this continuum? Looking at realistically how much of these whole foods you should be having how to not just incorporate these, but also give yourself a little bit of flexibility so you can manage and handle some of the life changes, some of the chaos that happens, and some of the unpredictability that happens when you are going through your day-to-day, weekly, monthly, and yearly routine. So ultimately, by the end of this video here, you should have a better understanding of how to select these foods, how to figure out whether or not you're making the right choice in different situations, in different contexts, how much you should be having, and how you can figure out how to start getting these into your routine. Back in the day, food was a means of primarily survival. Food was a way that we as humans needed to stay alive so that we could continue to live and thrive and do all the things we needed to do. And ultimately, different diets exist if you go back far enough based upon different environments that people lived in. So if you look at different environments around the globe, for example, Alaska and the Inuit tribes and the Inuit communities had a much different diet and a much different availability of resources compared to that of the Native Americans. The Inuits had a higher fat diet that was primarily seafood, nuts, a lot of whale blubber, versus those in the North American Native Americans where there were more grains, there were more game type of protein, deer, elk, duck, and different availability of fruits and vegetables. And a lot of that's based on the environment they were in. Same thing compared to if you compare Africa to Asia, South America to Europe. And all of this, in my opinion, if you go back far enough, is basically why we see different successes on different diets and why there's a vast amount of foods that encompass what we as humans should really be eating. And back in those days, people were not in the same situation where we were or we are in today, where we have food readily available to us. So ultimately, it came down to what people could find, what they could prep, what they could kill in certain situations, if it was more of an animal that they were trying to eat, what they could cook, what they could store because they didn't have refrigerators back then. And in that time frame too, it was what they could use. Back then, back in the day, it was very much nose to tail. There wasn't things like Bed Bath and Beyond and Walmart where you could go get spoons and cups. So they had to fashion these things out of a lot of the material that the animals would have, bones, teeth, that kind of stuff. So ultimately, different diets exist because of the fact that they come from different regions, different environments, and ultimately different ways of cooking, storing, preparing, and utilizing the food that was available to the ancestors of the earlier days of human civilization. We don't have to go back super far to know that the current state of our nutrition and our eating habits is drastically different than what it once was. Today, the food choices that are made by the majority of people are really built around pleasure, comfort, convenience, definitely not as a means to just survive, and primarily not for a means to provide our bodies with the nutrition that it really needs to be at its healthiest, it be in its healthiest way, to live in its healthiest way. There we go. In my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of others, is this comes down to the fact that unhealthy food is easier than ever to get. The creation of things that were not around even 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago, like Uber Eats, DoorDash, other food delivery services, the prevalence of drive-through, grab and go type of food and type of things that you can eat on in your car. The abundance of these things make it really easy and very hard for us not to be inundated by unhealthy food choices because of how just simple it is and easy it is for us to make them. Not only that, when we do get those types of food, the combination of salt, sugar, fat is super, super hard to say no to. The food manufacturers put these three things together because they know it's a perfect storm of flavor and it's so desirable, hyper palatable, which just means that it's really, really tasty. And it makes it very difficult for people to say no when they realize they've had enough. This even goes a step further in the fact that a lot of the physical design of foods, the crunchiness, the shape, the fact that a lot of these processed foods you can eat with one hand, it doesn't take a long time for you to chew them and finish it. When you take a bite, make it more likely that you will keep on eating these things rather than if you were to eat a more whole food based, minimally to unprocessed option. Now, it's really easy to say just put down the junk food, just eat the broccoli, eat the grilled chicken. But unfortunately, some people don't have that luxury and freedom to get those healthier foods. It might be financial, it might be where they live. Urban cities might not have as much resources as suburban areas. If you're in a rural community that is very isolated, it might be harder to get certain things from stores. And you might be limited based on what's available to you, based upon what's in your means. So the combination of making it easier to get healthy food, the combination of making it easier to get unhealthy food, and the combination for some of not being able to get healthy food, it makes it really, really hard and harder than ever to stick to a more whole food based diet that's going to provide people with the health and nutrition benefits that they need to be at their best. Trying to make healthy food choices available for everybody is a task well beyond the scope of this video. But where we can certainly start is just identifying what whole foods are, what ultra processed foods are, and how can we start making small steps to include more of the whole based foods into our diet. So right off the bat, whole unprocessed foods, in my opinion, and you might have different definition of this, which is fine. This is how I kind of comprehend it, is these are foods that are eaten as close to their natural state as possible. They might have to undergo some kind of processing to get from kind of being farmed to your plate, but there's not a lot of steps in there, and it's still really, really, really close to their natural state. Next up, we have the difference between minimally processed foods and ultra processed foods. So minimally processed foods, in my terminology and how I like to understand it, is these are foods that have been slightly altered. They're still close to their natural state. They're still very close and still provide some of the nutrition from their natural state, but they've been altered slightly into the form that you're going to be eating it. Now, taking a step further, we have our ultra processed food, which can be kind of identified as foods that have either been significantly altered and or have made from substances extracted from other foods. For example, on the left, you have your steak, the different cooked temperatures of steak, and then on the right, we have our donuts. Steak, kind of one ingredient. The only processing that really had to be undergone for the steak was to get from cow, go to a butcher, and then cooked and prepared to be eaten on your plate. The donuts, on the other hand, donuts, to my understanding, don't exist in the natural world, and it's a combination of sugar, of fat, of other things that are extracted from different resources in order to make the donut into the form that we're going to be eating it. I like to simplify things so they're easier to understand. So, in plain English, whole foods are typically naturally occurring. Processed foods are foods that have been changed, and this is like the umbrella term. Minimally processed foods are foods that have been altered a little bit. Ultra processed foods have been altered a lot. So, this can be a simple way to decide where something falls on that whole based food, unprocessed, minimally processed to ultra processed type of food. Here are three examples of different types of foods and how they can be processed differently. On the left, we have our food eaten closest to its natural state. We have our apple, oatmeal, and chicken. So these are foods that the only processing really done was taken from how it was originally made to how it was farmed and how it was either cooked, prepared to be on the plate. And the middle is our more minimally processed. So going from top down, you have your applesauce, which is the puree of the apple, still containing a lot of some of the benefits of the apple itself. And then in the middle, we have our granola, which is usually added with some type of maybe a little bit of sugar, a little sweetness, maybe some honey, maybe some extra preservatives, depending on how that granola is made. Not that those are always the worst thing for you, but this just changes the degree of processing that it undergoes. And then on the bottom, we have our rotisserie chicken, which, similar to the granola, can be classified in this minimally processed scale because there might be some things added to it, such as preservatives to keep it lasting longer on the shelf, maybe something to increase the flavor of it. But ultimately, there's some things that are added more so than just a regular grilled chicken. And then finally, we have our more ultra processed. And again, these are just examples. These are not cut and dry, yes or no, black and white. But compared to its original state, our apple juice is going to be more processed than our apple. Our oatmeal cookie, even though there's oats in there, there's also going to be a lot of extra things to give it that cookie taste, extra sugar, extra fat, maybe extra additives in there. And then on the bottom, we have our fried chicken, which is pretty straightforward. The fried chicken is going to be fried in oil, going to add a lot of extra calories, going to add a lot of extra things to it. And with the breadcrumbs that are fried on top of it, we're going to add a little bit more things to it as well that make it more of this ultra processed type of food relative to its original whole food starting point. Now that we've gone over what whole foods are, now we want to cover, okay, why do they matter so much? Why are we taking the time and why are you taking the time to watch this video about them? So it's pretty clear now that whole foods are going to be more nutritious. They're going to provide a healthier resource for our macronutrients or our carbohydrates, our proteins, and our fats, but also they're going to provide you with other things as well, such as fiber, which is going to be helpful for our gut. And more times than not, when people include more fiber into their diet, they tend to be a little healthier in the long run. Another reason why whole foods can matter is as you're digesting them and as you're digesting these whole foods, you burn more calories while doing so. There's a phenomenon called the thermic effect of food. And in this phenomenon, when you eat food, sometimes you have to burn some calories in order to digest them and in order to break the food down. So for example, protein is going to have the highest thermic effect of food, followed by carbohydrates, and then followed by fats. Now, keep in mind, this isn't going to be the make or break that is going to make you lose weight, lose body fat, but it is something to keep in mind because this is one of the reasons why a lot of diets will recommend keeping protein on the higher side and changing your carbohydrates and fats. But compared to unprocessed foods and ultra processed foods, you're going to be certainly burning more calories digesting the whole foods compared to the processed foods. The combination of protein, fats, and the fact that you're eating whole foods collectively with all the benefits and all the nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and all the other molecules that are in there all together as one cohesive food source is going to keep you fuller between meals. Protein and fiber are two of the most responsible reasons for this, but this is going to be super helpful when you're trying to control your hunger in between meals and keep your calories within the range that they should be. Whole foods also help you eat slower. It takes more time to chew, makes forces you to probably take spoonfuls, cut your meat into smaller portions. And because you're eating slower, you're going to be able to tap into those hunger signals a little bit more, as opposed to the processed foods where typically people who eat them really, really fast tend to overeat their calories anywhere from maybe 150 to possibly even as high as 300 calories or more just by eating really fast. Aside from the benefits of the macronutrients, the whole food provide more vitamins, minerals, and super helpful and super health promoting compounds and substances such as polyphenols and antioxidants to help keep our cells healthy throughout our entire life. So we can't necessarily give specific recommendations because I don't know your goals, I don't know your food preferences, and I don't know where you're starting from. But as a rule, here are some things to keep in mind when it comes to trying to figure out how to incorporate and include more whole foods into your life. There's this 80-20 rule that a lot of people stick to and start with when it comes to our diets. So this is going to really come down to 80% of your diet should be that whole-based food. 20% can be that flexible approach where you leave room for more minimally processed foods to possibly ultra processed foods, depending on what your preferences are. And this is important because processed foods do serve a purpose. They could be helpful. They could provide you with more of a psychological break, knowing that you can have some cake at the birthday party, you can have ice cream with your family, knowing that the base of your pyramid is really going to be the health promoting and more nutritious whole-based foods. When you are on the go, these processed foods can be super convenient and give you an opportunity to prevent yourself from maybe going too hungry, prevent yourself from keeping your calorie intake on the lower side because you just want to skip meals. So it might be good to have a little bit of wiggle room for you so that you're able to be more consistent and still manage your hunger throughout the day so you're not overshooting at the end and eating more than you really plan on. A way to manage and decide if you're on the right track with some of these decisions is to play what I call the better than game. So if you're in a situation, let's say you're out of your usual routine, you can't make your food, you're at a business trip, your meetings back to back, there's a buffet spread out on the table, and you don't know what to have. You put something on your plate and you're concerned if you're making the right choice. What you can do is kind of loosely compare what you have based on what's available to you. For example, if you choose the grilled chicken sandwich over the fried chicken sandwich, I would say the grilled chicken sandwich, regardless of possibly what could be on it, is going to be better than the fried chicken sandwich. The whole wheat wrap is going to be better than the white flour wrap. If you're opting for, depending on your eating style, maybe you're opting for a grilled chicken salad, which might be better than the chicken Caesar salad on the whole wheat wrap with bacon. So these are some options, some things you can use just to give yourself some flexibility, but also kind of ease the pressure a little bit of what you were trying to do and whether or not you're on track with your goals. But overall, whole, minimally processed foods are going to be better than your health, the better for your health. So the more whole foods you include, the more unprocessed foods you have, the higher the likelihood is that you're going to receive the benefits from there. And this goes from our reducing inflammation, having more beneficial and healthy biomarkers, cardiovascular risk for disease is going to go down, diabetes risk is going to go down, and possibly even our mental health is going to improve as well as we're providing our body more of what it can benefit from. So we've covered what they are, we covered what whole foods are, why they're important, why they are superior to their ultra-processed food counterparts. So the next logical step is to how do we start putting this into your diet more? My recommendation, depending on what you're comfortable with, is always start with the foods that you're enjoying. If you have a selection of whole foods that you do enjoy, I would certainly start building your new nutritional plan and new nutritional strategy around those foods. For example, maybe you don't like steak, but you like chicken and fish. Perfect. Those are two really, really good whole food based protein sources. Maybe you don't like things like quinoa or lentils, but you really like rice and you're okay with beans. Perfect. There's two whole food based carbohydrate sources. And start with making simple swaps. Moving from, white bread to whole wheat bread can be a really good way to just start getting some momentum and start to feel comfortable with changing your routine so that you're able to make more changes later on. When it comes to cooking some of these foods, again, starting small and building up from there is the best way to start to build something that is sustainable, but cook them in ways that you feel comfortable with. Maybe you're not the type of cook who can do a 15-step recipe that you found on Pinterest, but you can put some olive oil, dash some seasoning on the meat, on the chicken, on the fish, and the veggies, and then pop it in the oven, put it on the pan, and then go from there. What I also like to do and to recommend to people is to pair the food that you're trying to include more of with a food that you certainly like. For example, if you're trying to incorporate more veggies into your diet, maybe incorporating it into a rice bowl or into a wrap or something where you can kind of mask it a little bit can be a good way to kind of start easing into it as well. Sometimes it's helpful to buy more in bulk. Things like rice, things you use often, can be a good, and things that won't go bad quickly can be it could be good to buy those in bulk so you don't have to buy them as frequently. And last thing is on this slide is really don't expect perfection. Perfection really doesn't exist. Perfection is going to be something that very rarely it happens every single day. So in days where you're super busy or you feel like you're struggling, striving for good enough can be just what you need in order to keep progress moving forward. And if you want some more guidance on how to figure out what foods to start including and see which ones you maybe do like, hit the link below in the description where you'll be able to download a done-for-you shopping list that can get you some ideas started. So to recap, I know that was a lot and I appreciate you for sticking around, but our environments that we live in and have came from do play a big role in the nutrition and food choices that we make. Food has certainly shifted from a means of survival to primarily a means of pleasure, comfort, and convenience. So it's important to remember that for us to start feeling better with our nutrition, with our health, we do have to make this conscious approach to try to make some small changes so that we can get the benefits that we are trying to work for and work towards. Whole and processed and ultra processed foods do live on the scale. It's not so easy as super black and white where one is good and one is inherently bad, but we want to be aware of the fact that whole foods are going to be better for our health and are going to provide you with more nutrition, more vitamins, more minerals, and better resources of certain beneficial things like our plant compounds and antioxidants to keep you healthy. Ultimately, 80% of the diet is a really good starting point to shoot for when it comes to starting to incorporate more of these things into your routine. And to get started, I highly recommend start with what you feel ready, willing, and able to stick to. Be realistic, right? There's not a race. It's not something where you have to make all these changes immediately. However, it is good to build a momentum and build these sustainable habits so that things can stick with you in the long term. If you do want more from me, my website is going to, all this is going to be linked below on the screen here. And if you are someone who is local to the Fairfield area, wants to discuss possible in-person training, get some guidance on everything, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. Be happy to speak with you more.